Frank, it's only me and you, so when I pause, you talk.
You're on a roll.
Do you have anything to add on the general specificity of this?
No.
Jesus Christ. For our listeners, this is Frank's idea to do this episode. Frank is the one that sent me it last night. I ended up writing the whole outline. And when I ask him and I hand him the ball over, he has nothing to say to me except staring and smiling and saying, good job, keep going. He's already on to thinking about some piece of real estate he wants to buy in about an hour.
You used all my best examples.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie.
Ian, you son of a bitch.
Frankie, you woke son of a bitch. You probably sipping on a Bud Light right now, aren't you?
What was the text we got yesterday? You guys are early on Unwoke.
Yes, we were definitely early on the Unwoke messaging. As they say, Frankie, as a company, if you go woke, you go broke. And Bud Light is finding that out the hard way. So, Frank, who does not follow social media as ardently as I do. And when I say ardently, that means I check Instagram once a week. So I'm way ahead of Frank. So he's not usually up on the hot social
media. This is actually true.
But he was at another one of his Tony Robbins events, which he stays very close to. And Tony busted out a slide showing how Bud Light made one of the largest marketing gaffes in corporate history. What did Tony say Bud Light will probably lose from the gaffe we're about to talk about?
He thinks it cost him $5 billion in sales.
$5 billion with a B. So one marketing decision by one individual, and we're going to get into this, could have purchased the Washington Redskins, another very unwoke organization, which just sold for $6 billion, even though they have to tarp off the top of their stadium to not show how bad their attendance typically is on Sundays. I think they've had like 700 people show up to a few games, but they sold for $6 billion anyway. So anyway, Bud Light, if you're not following this, has a new vice president of marketing. Her name is Alyssa Heinerschneid. I'm going to guess that is German of origin, Frank, a very woke country. But she's in the hot seat big time right now for this $5 billion gaffe.
And I'm also guessing you pronounced it just right.
I nailed it. I took 4 years of German, Deutsche, if for the uninitiated. So she, on a podcast that's been since unearthed since this mistake that she made, she mentioned that in her role as vice president of marketing, that she's been charged with reinventing Bud Light away from its frat boy roots, and out of touch humor. So her way of doing this was entering into a contract with a TikTok star. Who did you, this TikTok star is Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan has how many followers did you say, Frankie?
Oh, I didn't write. It's got like, I think there's almost 700,000 likes or 700 million likes.
700 million likes, which so far we have like 700 likes on this podcast. So
most of those are family, friends, and relatives.
That's being aggressive. But that would be 6 more zeros that young Dylan Mulvaney, who's a 20-year-old TikTok star. Dylan is a transgender TikTok star, and I got to be careful here because I am not a woke person and I screw up trans all the time. I don't really know what it means, but Dylan is transgender, meaning Dylan was born a guy but is now identifying as a woman.
And I went back and double checked, 443 million likes. Half a billion.
That's going in the show notes for sure, people. That half-ass internet research by Frankie.
$500 million.
Yep, we had to look up who Dylan was. So they entered into a contract with Dylan to promote Bud Light. Went as far as sending some promotional Bud Light cans with an image of Dylan on the can. And as you can imagine, the base of Bud Light lost their mind. Kid Rock posted a video firing a machine gun into a couple cases of Bud Light. John Rich from Big and Rich came out and said that his bar will no longer serve Bud Light. A number of other country stars lost their mind. You gotta understand, if you want to transition away from your fratty roots and out of touch humor, you're pretty much saying we're going to shit on our base. I mean, if you say something like that publicly, the base of Bud Light, first off, 73% of Budweiser drinkers are male. Bud Light is close to 62%, so it's male. Predominantly white male is your drinkers. And where are they drinking Bud Light? They're drinking Bud Light at sporting events. They're drinking it at NASCAR events. They're drinking it in bars.
I'm glad that you delineated the difference between sporting events and NASCAR events, but please keep
NASCAR is not a sport. Let's keep it real. So if I am alienating some of our NASCAR fans, which there may be,
you got to be careful with our base. We can't sustain a 70%.
We can't lose our NASCAR fans in Jacksonville. I'm sorry if I lost some of you fucking rednecks down there, but it's not a sport. Let's keep it real. So anyway.
This podcast will be brought to you by Bud Light. We're looking for some products placement here.
People are losing their mind, and a bunch of initial reports are already coming in that their market share is cratering and was already dropping. One of their big distributors down in the South said that they've already done enough damage in the first week to disrupt their entire year-long sales projections. And really what's happened in Bud Light's effort to be inclusive, in their words, which is we need to be more inclusive to everybody. So in essence, when you say you want to be more inclusive, you're saying we want to spread the pie. We want to market to everyone. It's the opposite of finding your niche market and finding your base. You're saying we're going away from the base. And if we lose some of the base, we don't care, but we want to market to everybody. What they did was they excluded their raving fans, which is term Frank likes to use. My CEO of Keep, my partner, he loves to talk about how do we build raving fans with our first buyers. It's important. So you lose some of your biggest fans when you try to be more inclusive like this. And it's stock has dropped quite a bit. They're losing market share. As Frank said, it's probably a $5 billion marketing gaffe, right up there with New Coke, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So Bud Light's in a little bit of trouble right now, and they're trying to kind of bounce back and figure out. They haven't talked a lot about this, but it's obviously a decision they would probably not make in hindsight of all of the political trauma that it's creating for the company. Frank, it's only me and you, so when I pause, you talk.
You're on a roll.
Do you have anything to add on the general specificity of this?
No.
Jesus Christ. For our listeners, this is Frank's idea to do this episode. Frank is the one that sent me it last night. I ended up writing the whole outline. And when I ask him and I hand him the ball over, he has nothing to say to me except staring and smiling and saying, good job, keep going. He's already on to thinking about some piece of real estate he wants to buy in about an hour.
You used all my best examples.
Oh,
so
what we want to talk about today, let's not get into, Frank and I don't know enough about the transgender community. And if we talk about it too much, we're probably going to insult people. So we're not going to get into it because we're friggin' ignorant when it comes to that whole thing.
What we're going to do instead is we're going to play Let's Make a Deal, right? Like if we were going to run, there's two ways to look at this. If we ran Bud Light, what would we do? Or if we were a competitor of Bud Light, what would we do? Because I think Ian and I both think there's incredible value in both. And that's kind of in our lane, right? Marketing, advertising, business strategy, getting people kind of rallied around a point. is what we're good at. The other stuff we're not. Now, I don't know if the first move they should make, Ian, is to hire powerlifter Avi Silverberg from Canada, who just set the bench press record, the female bench press record, and he has a beard that is actually better than mine. So that's probably not where we're going to start, but where I do think we can start is with some strategy.
One of the wildest stories ever. So we do have to just expand on that for a minute because it blew my mind. I just shared this with Frank yesterday because as we were doing half-ass internet research on the situation, really diving deep, we got deep down a couple rabbit holes. But recently, this monster of a dude with a beard entered into a Canadian women's weightlifting competition and broke every woman's record. And the reason why he did this is because to enter into a women's weightlifting competition in Canada, the way the rules are set up, you can identify as a woman without providing any proof that you're not a woman. And the person who has all of the records beforehand is a transgender female, identifies as female, but born a male. So went through puberty, has testosterone, and she went and blew away all of the women's records by bench pressing a lot. So this guy came in and entered, and he's like, hey, I'm Sam. I identify as a woman. And they couldn't argue with him. So he got in and he bench pressed like 400 pounds, which is 120 pounds more than the previous record that was ever set. And then he went and blew away the squat, the deadlift. So there's this big hulking man, and he did it to just prove a point of some of the silliness of what's happening right now. He did prove a point. So this dude now has every woman's record because he entered into it. And the videos of him blowing away the records are hilarious because no one's clapping. Everyone's just watching him do it. And like, they can't stop it because they're the ones that created the rules for this competition. So if you've not dug into this, go Google man breaks every woman's weightlifting record in Canada. It's actually quite humorous watching him do his lifts.
And at the end of this, he got home, he went to his car, drove home, saw his wife and his kids.
The best part of the whole situation is the person, the transgender person who he broke all of her records is complaining about the fairness of the situation, even though she is a guy who broke the previous actual woman's record. So she is complaining about the same thing that she went and did to someone else, regardless. So if
now
it's
time to transition to the business side, where
if I were the CEO of Budweiser, I would start by firing Alyssa Heiner-Schmitzky. She would be fired right away. You lost us $5 billion. You got to go. And I'm pretty sure the board is going to push some of that. I don't think that will happen. I think they're going to dig in and support Alyssa Hammerschmidt. And I think they are going to double down on saying, we support this community. Regardless of what the business decision is, I think that they are going to double down and get defensive and support the decision, which is only going to alienate their base more. But all that matters in business is you stay in business. You grow your market share, you grow profit, you drive sales. And if you cost the company with one of your marketing decisions massive market share, you've got to go. You didn't do your job. Your job is to grow market share. Our goal is in marketing, the goal is to grow sales and grow market share, not grow inclusivity. Your job is to sell beer, and you didn't do that. You actually did the opposite, which cost the company a lot of money. So if I were CEO, I'd be Schickhan Hammerschmidt. It's not her name. I think it's Heimerschneid. I think I've forgotten her name.
You haven't gotten it right once. Why start now? Have you ever seen
Hemschneid?
Have you ever seen the movie Margin Call?
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoyed that movie quite a bit.
Awesome flick. Awesome.
Yeah,
flick.
it's a great movie. And not only is it a great movie, it's been on a lot lately, and it's something that I have watched. So it came out in 2008 or so. 8, 9, 10, somewhere in the, I think it actually came out like 11 or 12, but the point is it was summarizing 2008. And what happens is it's a Wall Street firm that's a blue blood Wall Street firm. It's based on one. It's kind of like it feels kind of like a Lehman Brothers, but if Lehman Brothers would have made it. And Jeremy Irons, who also plays Scar, fun fact, in the original Lion King, he's got like the perfect villain's
Look at
voice.
you. Look at you dropping some
I
tidbits.
got kids that watch Disney, baby. So that being the case, he plays this role, and in playing this role of the CEO, what he does I think is absolutely fascinating is he walks in, he understands what's happening, and then he pulls one of the executives aside. In this case, it's Demi Moore, and he literally just lops her head off. He goes, "I need to give the board a head," and I think that's the way business has worked for centuries. Like somebody's responsible. Someone has to take the fall. That's where we're at. And he fires her. And if you've seen the movie, you understand that there's a lot of back and forth there because she had fired somebody earlier in the day and she was not very nice to that person. And then she gets shit canned a few hours later and they end up in the same room. So it's kind of ironic in a way. But the point is, business mechanics have worked like this for centuries. And I think what's happening in this instance is things are moving in a different direction. If I was the CEO, I would do what you did, Ian, but I'm very curious to see what does in fact happen.
So the second thing I would do if I were the CEO, and this is what I would task the next VP of marketing with, get to know your base. Businesses are built on base. That's like there's a core group of followers that are raving fans. These are the super users at McDonald's that eat there 15 times a day. You should know that you should not alienate that group. That group is your core bread and butter that you have to grow and nurture and stay close to. It's the same with politics. You don't want to piss off your base. You don't want to get them down. You want to kind of rile them up if you can, but stop trying to expand into all these other niche markets and everything else. Focus on your base again, because if you lose your base, you've got nothing. Build your raving fans. So before all of this happened, and this is what's going on, there's desperation here. Frankie, in 2000, Bud Light's market share was 14.2%. In 2019, it had dropped down to 13.3%. And this is a percentage point for these guys. We're talking about millions of cases of beer.
Billion. This is a percentage point here reflects billions of dollars.
Yes. So, and in 2022, it had already dropped down to 11.2%. And this is before this marketing gaffe, which is going to create, they could get into single digits in the next couple of quarters based on this, but they have been losing their base. They have been losing it. So you have to know who your customers are. And I went into some of this already, but 60.2% of Bud Light drinkers are male. Over 50%, so about 51, 52% are in between the ages of 25 and 44. That's the ages. And Budweiser's overall brand, if you look at, you include Bud Heavy, the red label, if you include that with Bud Light, you're talking 3/4 of your customers are men, and they're over 50% in that 25 to 44-year-old demographic. You have to know that. That's your core. That's your group that you have to make profit on. And the way I'm going to look at this, Frankie, Screaming Eagle. You and I have both had a delicious bottle of Screaming Eagle before. It's an amazing bottle of wine. It costs between $3,000 and $5,000, depending on what vintage you get. It's a very expensive ass bottle of wine. Screaming Eagle is not looking to figure out how to get into the 21 to 24-year-old demo. They're not trying to figure out how to be more inclusive. Screaming Eagle knows who's buying their wine. It's affluent, rich, upper class, 35 to 65-year-olds that want to show off that they've had an expensive bottle of wine, right? So they're not trying to grow. That's their core. That's their growth. They know what it is. Smith & Wesson, they're not trying to go to every event in the world. Smith & Wesson knows their core. They know their core group, and they don't want to ever piss that group off, because that group is what keeps the doors open. So I think Bud Light has forgotten about why they've been successful for 50 years. Bud Light's been the king of light beers for 50 years because they knew their core base. And when this new VP marketing comes in and says, well, that just doesn't jive with the way I like things. It's too fratty and it's not inclusive enough, and that doesn't work. Well, that's fine if you're in 7th place and you're saying we should change. You were in first place for decades with whatever, fratty, whatever you want to call it. That worked. That had you number one. You're the king. Why would you switch it up just because it doesn't jive with the way you see the world?
So I think where I want to kind of go with this is having self-awareness. And when was the last time you went to a hardware store that wasn't Lowe's or Home Depot?
God, it's always Home Depot for me.
So there's a local hardware store around the corner from me. It's kind of on the other side of town, but it's close to my house. It's about equidistant between my house to Lowe's and equidistant between this little hardware store and my house. When I go to Lowe's, they've got 100 hammers, like no shortage of hammers. They're like, seriously, they got trim hammers, they got framing hammers. They got 100 different kind of hammers, different weights, different handles, left-handed hammers. But my local hardware store has been in business for probably 5 generations, and they have like maybe 5 hammers. They have like a framing hammer and they have a trim hammer. That's it. But they know who they are. They know who their base is. And when I go there, I go to that store for this reason. Someone knows where all the products are. I know I'm going to pay 25 to 30% more, but I know that I don't have to go to a parking lot and go through a huge store and go look for 1,000 things. I feel better when I go there. I know I'm supporting a local business. And that's why I go there. Like I'll be like, I need to buy light bulbs. It's going to cost more, but I'll take my son, I'll give him a bag of popcorn. He'll have a great time. He thinks it's a whole outing. That's who they are. That's their brand. They know who their brand is. If they decided to clear off an entire shelf and stock 100 hammers, they're going to go out of business because they can't do what Lowe's does. And at its simplest core, you have to understand what your unique selling position is. My local hardware store's unique selling position is I get to go into a time machine and experience a piece of Americana, and I get to overpay for something, but know that I'm supporting a local business that's owned by Americans with American products. And that feels good to me. What this person lost sight of is who their base is, who supports them, what they provide. And I think there's a very specific reason as to why their sales have dropped. Do you know what my theory is, Ian?
What's your theory, Frank?
In 1999, we're going to talk about this at the end. It's our cold open, right? What's up? Everybody said that over and over and over. Murph literally said that until about 2014 on his voicemail. I kid you not. Like it's the best thing, right? In 1999, when that ad came out, Anheuser-Busch was owned by Americans that own American companies. Anheuser-Busch had been around forever. InBev bought Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, and everything under it in 2008. And look what happened to their sales ever since.
Where is InBev located, Frank?
In the home country of your girl.
Germany.
Yeah, I think it's Germany, or it's definitely in Europe. They got locations all over the place. But I think, isn't it in...
I love when Frank lays out a theory that it was bought by a country that he thinks is somewhere other than...
It's European, but it's not Germany, it's Belgium. That's why I didn't say it immediately. It's not Germany, it's Belgium. But that's the point. It isn't Americans. So what happens in a lot of instances is Lowe's has huge market share, but they've lost the corner store feel. Now, I don't think they give a crap about it, but they're a conglomerate. There's a macro happening here that I think is happening in America. These huge conglomerates rule the world and they lose the sensitivities of the local market. It's the reason why I think InBev fucked up and they completely and totally missed on this ad campaign because they're not connected to their base. To them, it's just another series of beers that they sell. If you go to the website, it literally will take you 4 minutes to look at all the beers that they sell. It's because they've lost that corner store feel.
And they bought beers from all over the world. They bought Corona. They bought German beers, Czech beers. Right. So, how do you know every market unless you have someone locally who's close to it? You get too big, you try to be everywhere. But again, it's not knowing your market. It's trying to be everything to everyone. Frankie, if you laid out all those hammers, how many do you think I'd be able to name?
Oh, you can name all of them. That's a hammer. That's a hammer.
Hammers.
That's a hammer.
Hammers. I go to Home Depot. It's like to buy Christmas lights or batteries. Frank goes to actually buy actual real tools. I used to have to invite Frank over just to help me
Those were the good old days.
hang shit on the wall without it looking crooked. Like, could you bring your toolbox? I don't have one.
Back in the heyday of Cava companies, I would come up there with my toolbox.
Back when Frank didn't have shit to do, he'd come help me hang mirrors on my walls. I agree with that, and I think they just lost some of it. I think the second thing I would do is I would consider making better beer. Now, maybe this is just my personal taste, but I think Bud Light tastes like shit compared to other light beers. But in 2017, Miller Lite conducted they did a big marketing campaign where they called it Know Your Beer. And they actually went and they invited some 350,000 legal drinking age adults to take a blind taste test between Miller Lite and Bud Light, top selling beers in the country at the time. And they wanted to raise the stakes. They did this big event in St. Louis, which is the home of Anheuser-Busch. And according to this big survey they did, 76% of people preferred Miller Lite over Bud Light. So it could just be, you want to go blame what Budweiser is doing here is they're blaming some of their sales woes on their customer base. Instead of, maybe we just need to make our product a little better. Maybe our product's not working. Maybe we need to think about the taste of what we're putting out there. Maybe part of our market share slip is Americans' tastes are changing. We have better options than we had in 1990 when there weren't a lot of beers to go buy at a 7-Eleven. Now you can get beers from all over the world, craft beers, IPAs. So it could be just that, people's tastes are changing a little and you're not changing with it.
I think there's something else that comes to mind in it, and it's this for me. Business is incredibly hard. Like, it's incredibly hard. It's hard to stay relevant. It's hard to stay in business for all of these years. You must adapt, you must innovate, and you must market and sell. Like, that's what the core of business is you have to find people who want your product or you're going to go out of business. So it's not an easy thing to do. And I think there's a lot of, I think Ian and I were interested in this story because I think there's a lot of right answers, right? Like, you could take the holy shit, we're so sorry, we apologize to our base, and you can dig into that. They could also say, screw it, we want to rebrand this. We think the future is not our base. We think that, Miller Lite can have our base. We want to go into a different direction and we want to go that way. But that takes a lot of stomach and it takes a lot of time to rebuild something. But it could completely happen as well. So which way you go with it, we'll see. History will tell us that. But what I think is funny about this, Ian, and this is kind of what I think got us started with this, is if we had the hand and we could put the hand out there and say, this is what we would do, I think that's the most fun part about this whole conversation is, what would you do?
So I would go out and hire one of these big influencers that's ripping on your ass right now. I would go out and hire, someone like a John Rich, or maybe I would hire a Toby Keith, big country singer. I would lean in. I would go hire a Dale Earnhardt Jr., someone with a lot of popularity in the base that seems to be frustrated now, someone who's really popular down in the South, the states where you're losing the most market share. And I wouldn't necessarily address the gaffe. I wouldn't address the issue. I would just go do some campaigns with people who have traditionally done very well with my base. Frankie and I were doing a little research here. Here's a few of the most popular Americans right now. These are Q ratings. So number one, which is awesome, Morgan Freeman. Michael J. Fox, Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis, Danny DeVito, Keanu Reeves. He's a good one. Keanu Reeves. Everyone loves that guy. Steven Spielberg, Samuel Jackson, James Earl Jones, Dolly Parton would be a fantastic one, I think. Go lean in on the sports. Go lean in on Patrick Mahomes. Go lean in on Bryce Harper, Mike Trout. Go lean in on LeBron James. Go get some big names in sports. Get people that are popular. That's your base. That's what you know. I would go back to what has worked traditionally. You don't need to be sophomoric in your humor. You don't have to do all the fratty stuff if you're really against some of that. But go get some influencers that are traditionally part of your core and what you do, to show them that you haven't forgotten about that core, because you've already alienated and pissed them all off.
So there's something else that I thought about with this, and you took that in a different direction than me. Who gives a shit about likes on the internet or on Instagram? Why? They sell and they're promoters and they're they're well compensated because people's eyeballs are drawn to them. But why? I'm not drawn to it. I'm a different generation. Ian doesn't spend a lot of time on social media, but here's a great example. The Kardashian family has like 650 million Instagram followers. Let's go through this. Khloe Kardashian has 217 million. Kendall Jenner has 216 million followers. Kourtney Kardashian has 161, and Kris Jenner has 45 million. So that adds up to 650. And like, what's the one that was married to Kanye West? What's her name?
Kim.
Kim's not even on there. How many does she have?
Kim's I think Kim's better than all of them.
Right. So like collectively, they have 1 billion followers on Instagram. Do you know how many Instagram followers the Pope has, Ian?
How many?
7 million. So the Pope, the head of the biggest religion in the entire world, has 7 million people following him.
That's
7
sorry.
million.
That's sorry. He needs to get a better marketing firm.
Maybe he needs a better product.
That's half-assed. Speaking of brands that are losing their shine, the Catholic Church losing market share. That's the Catholic Church on a quarterly basis. He might need to go be more inclusive. The Catholic Church might need to be more inclusive.
But I think what's coming around now on the marketing side is this. Like, I don't know if this woman should be fired or not. And I'm not going to get a phone call as soon as this podcast airs and be asked to become the CEO of InBev or Budweiser or Bud Light. Like, not a chance, right? But what I would look at is the macro of it is who's running these companies and what are they valuing? Are they just valuing likes? Are they just valuing people who have social influence? And if they're not there now, they're coming. So for those of us that are older, that are executives, like there's a lot of currency placed on likes. Ian and I are of a generation where we don't really think that way, but clearly someone went all in on that exact same mentality. So if you own a business, who do you listen to? Who do you dismiss? How do you know who your base is? How do you make sure you don't do something that has this kind of backlash?
I'm going to go back also on this, Frankie, on that list of most popular people. In that group, when I kind of go through Morgan Freeman, Michael J. Fox, Denzel Washington, Keanu Reeves, Samuel Jackson, I don't know anything about their politics. I really don't know. Like the ones I just mentioned, I'm not sure. You always kind of assume some of the movie stars are going to be Democrats because they are, but they never talk about it. They don't. It's kind of like Michael Jordan used to never talk about anything political that was a hot button, and his popularity was high, and people used to rip on him in his community that you need to take a stand on causes. And Jordan's a multi-billionaire now because he didn't do that kind of stuff. He just kind of, I'm not going to alienate some of my fans by taking a side on something. So it's just not great business to kind of delve into some of those range. What I do want to say though, Frank, is if I were Miller Lite, if I were Coors Light, I would not make fun of the ad campaign. I think that's going to be a temptation, is to go make fun of them either on social media or something else, because you do have people who drink your beer that maybe supported that ad campaign, and you're going to like, don't go jump on the fire. Like, let's go pick on them about this, because now you're going to alienate more people who are fans of your beer, who maybe supported the marketing campaign that they just went out with, or take it personally. I would stay away from it. There's no way I would touch it, because again, you're by trying to go jump on something and get likes, which there's no doubt if they went and made fun of it, it would be one of their most liked social media posts ever. But you're also just alienating people that currently buy your product. Why do that? Why go insult anyone? Just go focus on your own marketing campaign and leave that alone.
So there's two big things. If you're in business long enough and if you try things long enough, you're going to flop. Coca-Cola was in business for 100 years before they flopped with New Coke. But what they did with New Coke that I think is fascinating is they had pressure. Do you know what the pressure was, Ian, that caused New Coke to come about?
One was market share dropping intensely.
Because of what?
What do you mean because of what?
What caused them to lose market share? There was one upstart that caused them to lose market share.
Oh, the Pepsi challenge.
The Pepsi challenge caused them to lose market share. So all
Blind
these,
taste test they did, which is the same as what Miller Lite did to Bud Light to get market share 5 years ago.
that's exactly right. So this happened, right? So the Coca-Cola was threatened. Everyone there makes a lot of money, especially senior leaders. They listened to the market. They did what they thought the market wanted, and they came up with a new product. But what Coca-Cola did is they released the product, and we talked about this with the guy from Choco Taco. I told him that Friday I didn't get a Choco Taco when New Coke came out. I went and bought, or when New Coke came out, I had my 75 cents and I bought a New Coke. And I remember taking 4 sips of it and being like, damn it, I wish I would have bought an ice cream because I only had a certain amount of money. But April of 1985, New Coke came out, and 79 days later, Coca-Cola Classic was back in stores. So like under 3 months' time, less than 1 quarter, which matters for businesses, they reacted quickly. So they made a mistake, they listened to the audience, and they made a huge pivot and gave people back what they wanted. And in 2000, 15 years later, that brand was, New Coke was completely shuttered. So I tell you that here because they made a mistake. What they do with it, they're going to be judged with how they react, Bud Light, in the next 90 days. And if they do a really good job, this will just look at as just a blip. Now, companies like, I would imagine, everybody but Bud Light could go out and get Kid Rock or John Rich or any of these mega stars that are in this particular part of the market and get them to support their product for less money. And this is a way that if it's done properly, a window has been opened. A competitor can go through that window and gobble up an enormous amount of market share if it's handled properly.
I'm going to finish with my last idea, which you already got to it. You beat me to my agenda item on here, but my idea, the first thing I said to Frank when we talked about this, I would bring back the WhatsApp campaign. I would bring it back. It's the most popular ad campaign they've had, other than like the Clydesdales. I think the Clydesdales have been around so long. The WhatsApp commercial campaign was bigger than the Bud Bowl, and the Bud Bowl was big, right? The bottles playing football against each other in the Super Bowls. But the WhatsApp, that needs to come back. And I think they need to bring back the original dudes that were in that commercial. I think they need to do a whole campaign around it. I would go lean in on what killed them. When they ran that WhatsApp commercial, all the reports on that, their market share absolutely spiked. And they ran it for a few years because it was so goddamn popular.
I feel like they ran it for like a decade. It felt like it was forever.
The New York Times came out and said that campaign boosted in the next quarter, it boosted their sales by 2.4 million barrels of beer. Go lean in with your base to show them we haven't forgotten about you. We haven't forgotten, you know what? We're going to get back to our roots a little bit here. We've pissed you off a little. We're sorry. Run the most popular campaign you've ever had in your company's history. Bring it back hard. That's the first thing I would do is screw this. You know what? We pissed you off. We're coming back in hard. That's the number one thing I would do after shit cannon, Greta Thunberg shine, or whoever the VP of marketing was.
Do it while you're there in Germany or InBev is located.
She's also a climate control activist. She'd become that now in this podcast. Some in the show notes, we'll probably have the right pronunciation of her name and the climate activist. Frank's a big fan of Greta
we're just waiting for ChatGPT to be good enough where we could do this whole episode for us.
The only reason we're doing this episode is because Frank and I know our base. We know our base. Thank God it's small enough that it's not going to insult any of you that regularly listen to this show. So we knew, hey, our base would probably like to hear our thoughts on Bud Light.
There is no doubt. Ian, I want to go slug a Bud Light and dump it over my head in an effort of showing victory.
Yep, no doubt. I'm Miller Lite to the core, always have been. So I'm kind of reveling in Bud Light screwing up here. I hope Miller Lite sells even more beer. Make better beer. That's what you should do.
For
Jeff.
our poor boy Ron Ori, his supply might be, he may have to load up. He may have to throw an extra couple of cases in his basement.
For those of our unwoke friends who follow us, we appreciate you. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review for this amazing episode that we've clearly put a ton of time into preparing for. And if you are new to our Unwoke Business podcast, mash the shit out of that subscribe button and stick with us.
Right
Frankie,
before you crush a can of Bud Light.
Frankie, you unwoke son of a gun. I'll see you later.
Bye, Ian.